Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Cari Mugz. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. I am so excited to have with us Barbara With. She is an international peace activist, an award-winning author, a psychic, and a channeler. And also, too, you channel with Albert Einstein, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And you also have a society or a party. Sorority? Does that make sense?
The Psychic Sorority.
Yes. And we'll talk about that. And you've also written 6 books, and one of them is about the afterlife, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And this is so amazing. So it's an honor to have you here. I'm excited to talk about this stuff because a lot of my followers love to talk about the mediumship stuff, but I think the channeling is what they would be having a lot of interest in. So how old were you, or when did you start channeling?
I officially started channeling in the way that I do now in 1987.
Oh, wow.
But I always like to say that I preempted that with music because I was a very, very young musician. I started playing the piano at 5. I started writing songs at 12. And by the time I got out of high school, I had 2 sets of original music, and I just went on the road for 20 years as a composer, performer in rock and roll.
Oh,
and
that's amazing.
So in terms of what is channeling, writing music is channeling.
Right. Yes.
And I once heard a very famous physicist named Brian Greene describe how he does math, and that's channeling.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
for me, it's about going into the nothing or the non-physical and listening and being able to interpret what I'm hearing back in my words and expression.
Yeah. And you made extraordinary work out of channeling. Yes. And you're on a tour right now it's called
Conflict Revolution.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I felt like that is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And just briefly about the origins. So when I began to channel, I had a mentor for many years, and she described herself as an antenna.
Oh,
so
yes.
There wasn't anybody else or any angels or aliens or whatever. So when I began to channel, that's how I felt. But in 1993, I wanted to do some group channeling to see what would these voices say coming to a group of people. And as it turned out, I had 2 new clients, and they had sent a bunch of their women friends. And when Kim came for her reading, everything was really elevated
and really clear. Like more clear. Yes.
Very clear and very fast.
I love that when that happens.
Yeah. I was hanging out of my chair, and she was a very conservative businesswoman who would never have come to a psychic except she was in crisis.
Oh, yes.
So it was particularly profound for her, who was really skeptical, to a couple days later call me up and say, I've transcribed my tape. What does this mean? And what does this mean? And what does this mean? And so we started to have these conversations.
Right.
And at the time I was playing, I was doing a long-term gig in a beautiful hotel in Minneapolis, and they would come on my breaks. We would talk. So about the same time, I thought, oh my gosh, here's my group. They were thinking, hey, let's have a bottle of wine and get all the girls over, and let's, ask Barb to come. So I called them up, and they're like, hey, we were just thinking that. So our very first group channel was December of 1993. So it was just a little over 30 years ago. And they asked, who are you? In a reading.
Right. In the reading. I have to say too, before you go, don't you love it when the skeptical readings are like the best, like when they're the best readings ever. Like you get, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can tell when they're skeptic and I get a little nervous, but then they turn into this magical
thing and it turns into something bigger than what you even imagined. I think those are the best kinds. So, and when you said,
Exactly.
when you were in the group, like when you were talking about being in the group and channeling the group, so is that like when you channel a group, was it a group of spirits, or like or just the group of people that were in it?
Well, I didn't know what to expect
Right.
because I didn't have I didn't have a party or anybody I was channeling. And so I met just the group of us. There were about 8 of us who came in, and I channeled for
Yeah.
about 2.5 hours, and we just transcribed it. And basically, what they said, and I wouldn't say this was exactly in the very first group we did, but we did many groups after that. They said that they were angels.
Oh,
And see, I think
I love
skepticism
that.
is a really good thing.
I do too. It's the cynics that's hard when they don't want to change their mind at all. That's
Good point.
skeptics are good. I love that because that they always have like a little bit of an open mind. It's the cynic that's like that don't want to change their mind and you can't say anything. That's the thing that I struggle with. But skeptics, I think skeptics are it's beautiful because like you, I've had skeptics come too, and they'll sit there and their arms are crossed, and then by the end of the reading, they're just like amazed. And I think that that's what's so beautiful. And those are the strongest, sometimes some of the strongest readings, I feel like, when you get a lot of information. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that skepticism will withstand the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're
Exactly
skeptical
right.
and it's the truth, then you learn.
Because your
So
spirit knows truth, right? Spirit knows truth.
exactly,
Your soul knows
exactly.
truth. And so it can't deny it, I feel like. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
So
you go ahead.
so the angels
Mm-hmm.
basically told us they had this revolutionary process to resolve conflict that they felt was going to be a pathway to global peace. So
Oh.
they kept saying, we're not, the byproduct of what we're teaching you will be global peace, but we want you to focus on this process and test it for us.
Is the process
Yes.
within first? Yes. I
Yes.
love that. I love
Yes.
that.
So they
Yes.
needed these humans to test it on real conflict. And the 3 of us who had already dubbed ourselves the psychic sorority, we just took the ball and ran. And we eventually had our first conflict. And as we're sitting at the table doing the traditional, well, you could have done this and you could have done that. And I said, wait a minute, let's get that transcript. And I read the one line that hit me when I channeled it so hard. It was like, if you have a conflict, the root of your part of it is within you.
Yes. Yes. I tell my clients or my followers all the time, they'll totally agree with you because they all know if you to the process to grow spiritually is all within. It's not something outside of ourselves. It's always something within. What I find interesting is that this thing that you're doing is you find it all within, which will go outside. Does that it will go globally and collectively. And I think that that is amazing. I think that that's a beautiful thing too, because of course, this will probably age me too, but I don't know if you remember, but do you remember, do you remember the Quantum Leap series
Yeah.
where Sam Beckett would jump into different episodes every different lifetimes, and at the very end he talks to God or source, and he says he thought he would make a bigger difference, and God says, well, you had to do it one at a time. You had to do it with one person at a time. It wasn't going to be one great big thing. You had to do it one at a time. So I think that this is exactly what people are looking for, exactly what needs to be done. I feel like it is to go collectively. It has to go within one person at a time. So do you do sessions with one person at a time, or explain that? How does that work?
As far as teaching conflict resolution?
Yes.
No, I do. I can do one-to-one coaching, but I often do, well, since, the past 3 years, I
Yeah.
often do Zoom. Now I've gone back into live classes
Nice.
and
Can you do groups at a time
Mhm.
too? Oh,
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And
Good.
what's interesting is after we put out our first book is Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, came out in 1997.
Okay.
And after that, and during that time, I had discovered that I could actually communicate with people who had passed on on a local
Mediumship.
level.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
mediumship.
Yep.
Teresa's mother came and other people. And then I was also I was called to channel for a woman whose son was autistic and had never spoke. And I sat
Oh.
between them and she'd ask the questions. And after a couple sessions, she's like, nope, I don't need you. Now I know for sure that I can hear him myself.
Oh, I
So,
love that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
and then there was my friend Mary, and her mother was in like an Alzheimer's coma. And
Oh,
she'd been talking about her mother and how it turned out. There was sort of this swoosh whenever a person who had passed on was in my presence, and I would see this picture of them. And so I'm describing her mother. She's like Joan of Arc, and she's this, and she's like, yeah, that's my mom. That's my mom. I said, when did she pass? No, she's in a coma.
okay. That is so interesting because I'm sorry.
No, there's so much to talk
Same
about.
thing. I know. During a reading one time, I was just like kind of shocked because her mom came through and everything was accurate. And she's like, but my mom's still alive. She just has Alzheimer's. And I was like, that's why. That's so interesting. Keep going. I love this.
Yeah. So anyway, so after our book came out, my literary agent got a call from a tabloid, a paranormal tabloid in London, that wanted a interview with Princess Diana on the 1-year anniversary of her death. And I'd never done such a thing. I'd never gone. Dead people always came to me. I'd never gone looking, right?
Right. Yes. Like I know. I don't. Yes. I agree. I agree. Mm-hmm.
So I thought for a long time, because I thought, oh, a tabloid, really? But so I thought, let's try it. And I channeled the questions and the answers via typing. And when I went back to read it, I just wept. It was so in depth and so beautiful. And
so not you, huh? Like, so,
yeah,
like you
so not me.
I love that when that happens. I love that, yes, that oneness. I love that. So that ended up, go ahead. I keep interrupting.
That's okay. Let me tell you, the tabloid flew me out to New York. Mm-hmm. We spent 5 hours together, but they didn't want it. Because, as you might imagine, Princess Diana did not mention one word about Camilla or Charles.
Oh, and they wanted that's what they wanted. Oh,
so
yeah.
My agent and I thought, well, if there's, if she'll talk, maybe there's other famous dead people who want to talk. So we made this list, and I would go to them, and some of them would, and some of them wouldn't. And by the time we got to John Kennedy, he said, "You don't have to think up people. We are a party. There's 12 of us." They call them Party of 12. And they actually told us about this in the last reading in Diaries.
That's your book, isn't it? Party of 12?
Yes.
Yes.
The Afterlife interviews.
Okay. So the Afterlife book is this about? Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's what all these interviews were. But when I got to Einstein, that is the voice that was coming through me
that
in
you
my
connected
reading.
With so strong.
And also, the body feeling of the music that I think he's been with me my whole life. And so in 2005, I decided to do a book just for him, just to channel a little book. That's what I thought. Well, let's see what he has to say. It was the 100-year anniversary of his miracle year. Oh. So I channeled 5 or 6 sessions, and then I spent the winter editing. But what happened during that winter was that he delivered to me something he couldn't do when he was alive, which was a unified field theory, which is a theory of how everything works on the macrocosm and the microcosm. Oh. And this unified field theory had what he called a map of human consciousness, which explained how our human consciousness interacts with energy.
Yep.
To manifest matter.
Yep. I've seen some of that too. And some of I don't, you don't know when you see things or when you download things, you kind of don't really know how to explain it, but you're like, I get, and then when you're talking about it, I'm like, okay, I get it. And they like scientific evidence, right? Like they have scientific, like what you're explaining, scientists have said.
Well, no scientist has ever come up with anything as profound and complete as what we have. But every time I go, because through all of these years, I've been watching science. I'm not a scientist.
Right. I know.
All I ever wanted to be was a rock star. Here I am.
Yeah.
But through the years, like in 2016, I think it was, they discovered the gravitational waves from Einstein's relativity. I was like, you mean our gravitational waves, because there's gravitational waves
Yeah.
very much apart. And then Nassim Haramein has been working very hard, and he's come up with his unified field. And my associates and I have to chuckle because he's got little few pieces of it, and they fit in,
And
sort
they
of
fit
like
in,
you said.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not anywhere near as complete
profound.
as
Right,
what we
as what
have,
you found.
including, just to add, a scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe.
See, I love that. I do.
That was
love
so profound to me. I was like, this is kind of like, am I just making this up? Because it's so brilliant.
I know. I get
and
that.
doesn't it feel that?
Yes. You're like, am I
know.
crazy? Am I? Yes. And then you just know, like and you get, validation after validation. You just know. And I think it's beautiful what you're doing. And I have always said, if science and spirit would just combine, and that's exactly what you're doing. Like if science and spirits could just combine their efforts, it would just be amazing. Like, and that's what I feel like you're doing on a community, on a collective level, right? That's what you're doing. Yes. And I think that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when that book came out, Imagining Einstein, Essays on M Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion, I kind of left my life behind, and I just decided I'm going to manifest this book to go where it needs to. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I fully intend to find out one step at a time. And I was invited to speak at a conference in Taos in 2007 that probably reached 500,000 people around the world. And it was really just took me all around the world, teaching, training, getting to sing as well.
Yes.
And
I love that you have music involved too. I love that because it's like so clairaudient. Like you just channel all that. So you were already kind of there. Like all of your journey led you to this part.
Exactly.
I feel like. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
So that's how I came to be an emissary for Einstein. And then in 2016, I'd kind of come in off the road from doing that, and I shifted gears a little bit. I became an investigative journalist in Wisconsin, where I live, and founded a media co-op, and kind of watched the beginning of the fascist takeover of Wisconsin, and now we see this whole global totalitarianism that we're all dealing with on that level.
Yeah.
So, but I still published in 2016 a book called Einstein et al. Manifestation, Conflict, Revolution, and the New Operating System. Because what I wanted to do was do the art or the pictures to depict these things.
Oh, I see.
And I had looked in Imagining Einstein, I just did these little hand drawings like a scientist might, but I wanted to do them. And so I looked for artists. I couldn't. And so finally I just thought, I'm just going to do it. So I sat down with my graphic skills, and I created the whole illustrations of this unified field theory. And then that proves why conflict revolution works.
I see.
Conflict revolution at the end too.
So do you kind of show this to people that you're like doing the sessions with, or what do you call it? Is it like a course, or is it a session, or?
Well, I'm working on a course, but I also just do classes. I've been doing Zoom classes for the past couple years. Lately, I've started doing in-person classes where I'm called, or where I find myself. Right. And so yeah.
If I was just in general, like just my listeners, if I was like having conflict within myself, is this where, like, why would I come to you? Does that make sense? Like, if I was, can you answer that for me? So like my listeners can kind of know if I'm having some conflict with myself, or if I want an awakening, or what does that make sense? And I understand that it helps with the collective, but if I'm having an internal conflict, like, how would I know? I mean, you have chaos, and you have, depression and things like that, but why would I be like, okay, I'm going to come and see this? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, first of all, because what we offer is truly revolutionary.
Yes.
And when you have this internal conflict, it's predicated by being triggered, right? You get emotionally triggered.
Right.
And then you get intellectually obsessive. And so what we do, what makes it so revolutionary is not that you haven't heard these pieces before, but the way that Einstein put them together to show
Einstein,
us.
that's the difference. That's the
Yeah.
difference. It's not like you know, so if people want to know what their reason for to be here is, or their purpose, this would be like that internal conflict of feeling not good enough or feeling like they don't have, this would show them this is why they would that they're part of the collective, right? But the difference is
Yes.
the Albert Einstein part of it, right? Yes.
Well, that, and even though we're all part of the collective, we're a fractal that we've been given our own domain
Yeah.
to take care of, to live in our own life, separate. I mean, the lens
Right.
of the
It's
physical
that
world.
ocean drop. We're alone, but we're part of yes,
Mhm.
yes.
And when we change ourselves, as you know, then
Mhm.
we change what happens around us
Around us, yes.
and
I
what
love that.
manifests.
I
And
know.
in the unified field theory, what happens is the center of the source of everything is in the center of the planet.
Now,
And
I've never, so source as in like the universe source. And that is a theory I've never heard before, like in the center of the earth. I think a lot of people think of it as outside of ourselves or outside or like a heaven, or so having it be in the center of the earth is actually profound to me. Like, I think that's pretty, and it makes sense, like, because your spirit knows truth. So you're just like, oh, I think that could, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that.
Yeah. And when he told me that back in 2005 and said, the center of the earth is like a black hole, because the center of the earth is spinning so fast and it's so hot from the edges of the planet that it sort of drills through space-time and creates this black hole effect. And when he said that in 2005, I was like, you want me to go out there and tell people this? But if anybody goes to YouTube and Googles Brian Greene and Science Time, there's a whole video that just got done about Brian Greene explaining how black holes aren't just these big things out there eating planets. They can be very small constructs. And in fact, he said, we can be in a black hole in the earth, and that's how we're having our physical reality. So that blows me away.
That does me too, actually. This is really interesting.
Yeah, right?
So interesting. Yes.
So from the source, compassion impels energy to step out of nothing and into something and create what we call a compilation of consciousness. So it's a circular membrane domain that surrounds all of the mathematics that are making up what's in your physical world. So the chair, the fire, everything.
All of it. Like,
and from there, a gravitational wave goes from the center of the planet to the surface of the planet. And when it breaks through, it's creating our body. It's creating this lens, they call it. And we project the entire universe and we perceive it back to us. So while people say, separation isn't real, it is really real. It's just not the whole operating system.
Right.
It's just a part of it. So what he says is, this is a perfect system that whatever is programmed on this wave and in this particle is going to perfectly manifest. So if there's a lot of conflict on this part of the wave, it perfectly manifests as conflict. Why the system can be perfect and we still have conflict.
And yes.
So when we go in and we work on this part of the wave, he calls it the 3 human dimensions of emotion, intuition, and intellect. Oh. And they're like spiritual organs. You have your heart does one thing and you fix it one way, the stomach does another, but they all work together. And when you know how they're supposed to work together, they work optimally. So emotion has one definition that's different than what we think it is in I think the classical sense of feelings.
Okay.
It's defined as the primordial soup. It's at the basis of all physical reality. So in this first part of the wave that's coming out of the compilation is this big wave of emotion. So all of my fractals are just identifying, I am Barb, I am Barb. All the chair fractals, I'm a chair, I'm a chair. So it's moving up, and when it moves up, it splits into 2 now. Okay. And it becomes intuition. And intuition is the voice of emotion, which is really the voice of compassion. And intuition is that that impelling statement or whatever. It's not always a statement.
Right.
That's impelling you to take the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole of what's going on.
Right.
And intuition knows that because it's connected to compassion, which knows the bigger picture of everything. So it's going to impel you. And like there's intuitive messages right now going beat, heart, beat, heart, beat, heart. Right?
So it's the intuition. Yeah, it's our yeah, I get that. Like, and I honestly, Barb, didn't realize, I never even thought that emotion was connected to intuition. I mean, I knew it kind of was, but I also thought that intuition like spoke without emotion. Does that make sense? Because it's in some instances when I've had my strongest intuition, there's been no emotion attached to it. There's been just like, this is what I do. But I understand that what you're saying is that our emotions can help with our intuition then, right? Is that kind of what? Yes.
Well, there's emotion. There's the primordial soup that's coming up and impelling all of this stuff to go be a chair, go be Barb. It's always impelling you to take a step, go be a chair. And then when it gets to the third, the intellect is designed to take all of that and sort through what's inner and outer. So if it's I am a chair is the message of that fractal, it revolves it to that is a chair. So all the things that are outside of us get identified and projected, and then it identifies what's also in our inner world. So what happens though is, as we all know, intellect holds ego.
Right.
And ego holds the mechanism that actually instigates the decisions. So if you're driving and you get an intuitive message, turn right, it's not your intuition that makes your hand grab the steering wheel and turn right. It's just impelling. To intellect and ego, that's the area that then makes the decision to put the hand on the wheel and turn right. Okay, and what happened? Go ahead.
Aren't we kind of and that's great. It's just I think in the new age culture or we're kind of taught differently, right? We're kind of taught that our intuition is like what makes us turn. It's not that our intellect, it's like our intuition. Does that make sense? Like, so it's kind of like it's just different than what we've been taught normally or what we've been taught. So when we do this, you kind of explain, or when, we take a course or we listen to these that you're doing, it explains it. It like kind of dumb it down.
Yes.
For people.
Very dumb.
For me, for people like me.
No, but you're getting it though. But see, what happens is what Einstein says is, and this is why it's so revolutionary, it revolutionizes a lot of new age stuff. And one of the things is that he says that the root of all conflicts that manifest in the lens come because ego says no to intuition.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Yes.
So ego can say, turn left. I got to go to over here. And that's not going to be, we've all done that. Intuition says, rest. I can't rest. I've got too much to do. And what he's saying, and so far it's proven true for me, is that when we retrain ourselves, when we have this new operating system where the intellect is so mastered that its job is to listen for the impelling and then do it.
Mm-hmm.
And all that other time, all that activity in our intellect, and you know how much it is, we were thinking about tomorrow and yesterday and this and that, is unnecessary.
Yeah.
And when he says to have this open mind, like you're sitting under the night sky and you're connected to the ground and you're seeing the whole sky. That's how your intellect should be, watching the world.
Right. And can you do that in meditation? Like, or is that just, you need to be outside and look at the sky, literally?
No. It's just, it's a metaphor for.
Yes, that's what I thought. For you could, okay.
Yeah, as opposed to all that thinking that we do.
Yes, that we think that we do. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I love
and the other revolutionary thing that really changes a lot of new age ideas is that this emotion, we are supposed to be feeling all of it. It's not, just stay in the joy and don't go into the this. No.
Right, because we sometimes get taught that, and I talk about this all the time on my podcast too, that toxic positivity. Like we're always supposed to be happy. We're always supposed to be everything. And I'm like, that is not true. We have to process things. We have to feel these emotions, because if we pretend it's not happening, we can't do the inner stuff, which does the outer stuff, right? Is that
Exactly. Yes.
yes? I
But what
love that.
happens is just getting back to how matter manifests. All right. Emotion comes up, intuition says, go be a chair. Intellect turns it around, projects it, that is a chair. Well, that's all well and good. But when we have an anger and it comes up through us, and probably intuition is going to tell us, go feel it or release it or something good for our bodies, something good for our health.
Mhm.
And it
Right.
gets to the intellect, it triggers thoughts
Yep.
that project outside ourselves, and that becomes a reality. Well, he didn't respect me and he didn't do this. And now we've got to go into the outside of ourselves to try to figure out this conflict and, communicate with the person who did it to us. And there's all this
Right.
rigmarole.
Makes so much sense.
So the process we teach people is how to feel the whole gamut. First of all, thinking is not feeling. Thinking about why you feel something is not processing feeling. It might
Okay,
help
that's
you to
interesting, because I
identify.
think a lot of people think that. A
I
lot of people
know.
think that if they think about it, or they kind of mull it over in their head, or even talk about it, they think it's processing it.
It's processing it. You're processing. But
Okay.
a lot of times what we do is, and I'm not, I've had therapy my whole life, so I'm
Right.
not
I know.
dismissing
Yes, I
old
get that.
world ways. But
Yeah, I know.
what I've taught myself is that feeling is really what we want to do is we want to create a channel with our breath to move the emotion, which is situated in our solar plexus, up through our body and not marry to any thought at all, unless
So is
it's
this why breath work works for
yes,
some people?
yes,
Okay, this makes sense. It's like all connecting the
yes.
dots. I get it.
Because you're breathing
Okay.
and you're breathing, and you've had breath work. I've had breath work where after
Right.
an hour breathing, I go weep
Yes,
because
people do.
we're touching these deep. And
Mhm.
if we don't do this, emotion doesn't just go away. All that emotion gets abscessed and it gets stuck. And then if you're on that wave, that perfectly manifesting in the lens, all that abscessed emotion is going to sit there. And what it manifests as is either an inner conflict of illness or an
Yep.
outer conflict of wars or relationship issues. So it
it's all
creates
connected.
those.
I see.
So when we go in and we have a new way of processing it where we do it with our breath, I used to have a mantra. I'd say, I don't need to know why I'm feeling this. I just need to breathe. So, and sometimes I had to say it every 5 minutes because I would get back on oh, she did this to me. It's like, nope,
Right.
I'm not going to
Right.
attach to those thoughts. I'm going to move that because this is our unified field when we can feel the whole of our emotion.
Right. This is so crazy to me because it's like aha moments for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that fits. But I'm going to just ask you one question, and it might be a stupid question, but
No.
Can you explain what the lens is? When you say the lens, what do you mean by that? Because
the lens is the physical world. It's our physical experience of the world.
Okay,
but
that helps.
That's only 10% of the whole operating system. The rest is non-physical. It's in these, and if I had a map of the unified field, you could see that it's really but to us, it's the whole universe.
It's the whole universe.
That's what we're experiencing.
So is it kind of like a metaphor of what we see through the lens a little bit? Is that, or no?
Well, I think the lens of our eyes.
Yes. Okay.
Which operates like it flips things like that. It's part of that. Okay, go be a chair. A chair is out there. So there's a lens component in it, but he calls it the lens, and he depicts it as like a reflection of that compilation of consciousness.
Okay, that makes sense. The reflection. Yes, that makes sense.
So it's like some kind of membrane domain that we're projecting the whole universe and then perceiving it back to ourselves on this inside curvature of this, which is what Brian Greene said, is that it's a black hole that we're doing that in. I see. So that blows my mind, but.
So do you feel like so I just have to ask too. So is it kind of I mean, I think it's a great, kind of a cool relationship that you've had then with Albert Einstein then, right? Like, I think that's kind of cool. As a medium myself, I've never tried to channel, or I just, just do But it's interesting to me that you have this relationship with Albert Einstein. And do you think, and I know that you know that there's no one more superior or inferior than anybody, but why do you think that he chose you guys, your sorority or you? Does that make sense? Just because that was
Well,
your
the angels told us we volunteered and were chosen.
Oh, nice. I like that.
So I
do
was
like
born on February 7th of 1955, and he died in April of 1955. So I
Oh,
think when I was very
there's
young and he went
some
into afterlife,
mhm.
that there was some kind of agreement that we had and it began. And I think a lot of the music was part of training me for this.
That gives me chills because that kind of
Yeah.
resonates with me because I'm big on like dates like that. Like, and with the music, because just I could feel it because that's why I said it. All of your stuff has brought you to here now because I really could feel that. I feel like everything that you've gone through brought you to this because I feel like it was kind of and I hate to say predestined, but it kind of in a way, I kind of feel
I
like that. I kind
think,
of feel like that's what this was like your journey, your purpose. And I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah,
I,
and
yeah.
not knowing, because when I was growing up, like I said, I was singing into the hairbrush and I was going to be a rock star,
I love
period.
that too.
Heat wave, and I'm going to be a rock star. So
Yeah.
I think in talking about manifestation, about how to manifest, a lot of it, like you've said, because I've listened to some of your podcasts, is
Mhm.
you can work backwards from how it's going to happen, but not be too attached to the process of where it's
I think that
going.
that's where everybody gets this so hard is they put it out there, but if they have a heart, they want to control how it happens, even though you have to be open to however it happens. So yes, go ahead. Cause I love manifesting. My clients love that part. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's important about working backwards with a theoretical how it can happen, it gives our intellect like, oh, okay, all right, now I can see how it would happen. It may not happen that way, but at least now I can see how it can
See how
happen.
it can. Yeah.
So it opens up a part of us. But for example, for that big event that I was at, I had left my husband, I'd left my state, I moved to another, and I was a mess. And I had hired these women who were promoters who were helping independent publishers like myself. But I had no idea how any of this was going to happen. And I just kept saying, I have no idea, but I fully intend that I'm going to do this.
And I have
And
to ask you, did you have any scientific background? Like, did you know? Because some of the stuff you're saying, I'm like, I don't know if I could, like, it kind of is a little bit over, you know what I mean? But then
yeah,
once you kind of see it, you're like, oh my gosh, that really resonates. Did you have any scientific? It was all musical, right? Like no scientific stuff.
no. And I had
Yeah.
to, get it from Einstein and then learn, what does this mean? And am I going to go out into the world and say these things and scientists are going to look at me like, you have to be
Right.
kidding? And
I
so far it
know.
hasn't been that, but yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I think everyone that has like this spiritual thing, or I like me included, you kind of get to that point where like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to go out there and do this? But you just get that push that you have to, you just have that. It's like almost uncontrollable, really. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I guess ego could take over and could be like, no, we're not going to do this. But there's just your soul knows differently. Right. Yeah.
But also, I think it's important to understand intuition in a way. Here's the example I give. My mother had to go into a assisted living. So we
Mhm.
did all this research, my sisters and I, intuitively, this was going to be the place. It was near the house where she had grown, lived, and I was going to be living in the house, taking care of her at the assisted living. Well, we got in there after a month, and it turned out that they failed to tell us that they were just an interim company that was called in by HUD because the original owners had walked away. And there was this chance that in 4 months, everyone was going to get evicted. And I beat myself up so badly. I thought this was the place. Right. What are we going to do? So we worked our way through it and we stayed there, but we decided not to sell the house to make sure that, it was going to be okay. In 4 months, she wasn't going to get evicted. 4 months, she's walking around. She's even happier than ever. They've got the business going. She falls and breaks her femur and she cannot be there.
Oh,
And had we sold the house,
yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to bring her home. And then I found 2 homeless PCAs and a program to pay for them. And she lived another almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Happily.
So it was almost like your intuition was right, but it didn't seem like it,
Yes.
right? Like
Right.
that's what happens all the time. We listen to our intuition, we do the things, and then we're like, well, wait, this was, but then it ends up being like that's the way it was supposed to be. And people have a
Exactly.
hard time seeing that when they're in it. It's the big picture that they don't see. Yeah.
Well,
That's
and I think we think that if we listen to our intuition, everything's going to just
is
turn out exactly as we want. And that is not the
that's not
way.
always how it goes. I
Yeah.
know. And I try and tell people that sometimes it's not going to be rainbows and roses all the time if you listen to your intuition. Sometimes you're going to do something and it's going to cause a cause and effect reaction that you're going to end up being on the same where you're supposed to be anyways, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I am so glad at this age that I never became a rock star. I mean, trust me, I had 20 years of being a rock star. But when I look back and see how much of that drive too for me was because I didn't have the self-love or the self-affirmation. And so, it was that external gratification that was, oh yeah, if I get, the whole world will love me then. But now I'm so glad it
You
never
don't have
happened.
that.
I would
Yeah.
not want to be in that position or in that industry for sure.
Right. Because it's so, yeah. I'm glad you're at where you're at. I'm glad you didn't be a rock star.
I'm still alive. It can still happen.
I love this. So what are your plans for the future? Like, are you going to be more speaking? But you did say you were going to have a course, correct?
Yes, I'm working on an online sort of a downloadable course that you can take for conflict resolution right now. I am leaving the country at the end of January. I'm mostly going to the UK, but I have some other places around Europe that I'm going. And I'm on a world peace tour. And I say I'm looking for the participation of the willing to take part in a worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war using conflict resolution. Because if we all go in theoretically and find this us versus them, whether it's, you and me versus, he's doing this, or it's intellect and intuition,
right?
Then the natural manifestation will be this reduction of all of this insane war that's bringing us to the brink.
Yeah. I know this is small compared to what you're doing, but when you said instead of it us being us versus them or me versus you, I remember one of my clients was going through marriage counseling and she always had this thing that it was like the husband against the wife. It was always like this, him against her or him against her. And the counselor finally was like, it's you guys together, a united force for the family. And that changed the whole dynamics of the family. And I know that that's a small part of it, but it actually is. If everybody could be that way, if we could stop thinking about it's me against you or us versus them, and it's a united force, that's what your peace act, that's what you're trying to do. That's what you're creating. And you're just doing it at one. So I could just call you Sam Beckett. But you're doing it one person at a time, right? But you are hitting the masses more and more. So you are speaking and you're going to all these places, which is beautiful.
And you know what? I launched my tour last July 9th because that was the anniversary of the Russell Einstein Manifesto, which was read in London in 1955. It was his last manifesto. And basically it was them urging world governments to make peace, to solve their conflicts peacefully because World War III will destroy us all. And that was 1955.
Right.
So he was like a psychic back then. And then in 1993, when we started doing this, world peace was kind of a sweet idea, but nobody really had any urgency about it.
Right.
But I'm telling you, since I started this tour in July, I've been on, I wouldn't say hundreds, but I've been on probably 2 or 3 podcasts a week. Since then. And everybody wants to talk about this. Everybody wants to know, how can I help?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Peace? How
could my clients or my following, how could they help your peace activists, or how could they join what you're doing? I mean, I'm going to leave all of your information in the show notes at the bottom of these podcasts, but if I was blown away by this and I wanted to join and help, what could I do?
Well, that's what conflict resolution is for, is that I'm adding on, asking people to do this, not the byproduct will be world peace. The purpose is for us to learn to love to love ourselves, self-love, and that alone will help your life to thrive.
Right. Because
It'll help you to manifest what your dreams are, what your purpose is, what your intention is.
well,
But
it'll put you in alignment in that frequency, right? Like,
yes,
yes.
it'll align you to compassion. What did we say?
Okay.
And all I'm doing is asking people to remember that when you do this, whether it's with conflict resolution or like your friend or client who realized it can't be us versus them, it has to be us together. However you do it,
right.
Remember that is part of creating world peace. You are the microcosm of the macrocosm. And when you create peace within yourself, you are doing your part. And that's all you can do. And it's a gracious plenty.
Right. And that's beautiful because I'm so it's not like you have to go out and change the world. You just have to change. Well, you just have to be you. You have to resolve that conflict within you. And so that's how they can start. And that's how
absolutely.
Like, read your books or do whatever you have that's available for them to participate in, correct?
Yes. And usually my readings are pretty in-depth with not just training people how to do this.
So what would your readings be like? Because like they're not like normal mediumship readings like what I do. They're like so what are your readings entail?
Well, generally we take a look at where you've come, like what it shaped you through your life to be here.
Do you just sometimes stay on so I have to ask, do you go into like past lives for that, or do you just you do? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
We do past lives, and then we talk about what is happening within these 3 human dimensions of your system, and where the mind and the intellect can be, because the intellect is usually the dimension that we need the most alignment to, because intuition is never going to tell you wrong. Emotion is just what it is.
Emotion,
and then we look forward, and while I've done really my big fair share of predicting, it's really not my first forte, but we do look into the future to see what's coming up, to see, and then they give you really clear steps to be able to deal with whatever those things are. Right. And how to, a lot of people are trying to manifest things and they think, oh, if I haven't manifested, I'm a failure. It's like, no.
Yeah.
So when we get down to this really microcosm of how you relate in and get this total control of this inner world, then you begin to not only manifest what you dream of, but that you learn to love what you have. You learn to appreciate that you're a miracle sitting in a chair.
I know. I love that you say that, because I tell my followers all the time, the biggest secret is to just have gratitude for where you're at, like be in the now. The biggest spiritual thing you can do right now is to be grateful for the now, even if it seems like it's really sucky. It's just be happy with the now, and then it just open to all this possibility. And I think that that's so hard for us sometimes, especially when we are in different emotions, in grief, so that it's cool that this will help resolve some of that, so you can sit in that and be in that place.
Because we've been told so much that, depression and anxiety, and there's something wrong with you, and you got this and that. We throw all that out the window and say, depression is an emotion. Anxiety is emotion. Don't connect it to any thought. Honor it. Love it. Breathe it through your body. Spend some time with it, because it's a wave. It's going to dissipate at some point. It feels like it's forever, but that's what your intellect tells you.
Yeah, that's what
And as somebody who, I will be 69 soon, I can look back at all of those things that in the past were just shameful and horrible suffering. And I would not trade one moment of anything that came my way. And I had a really, really tough upbringing that was dissociative, which gave me these gifts, helped me develop these
I believe
gifts.
Mine did too. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Yep.
But I know when we're younger, and it's like, oh, we're supposed to be doing this and we're supposed to do that, and I'm going to be better. There's like all this drive. Well, some of it for me is just that when I get to this age, It's way different. You just don't sweat the small stuff. But I've worked this process for so long that I have gotten to this place, especially in the past few years, where I've never gotten emotionally. I am so solid and so strong, like I've never been in my whole
It
life.
just doesn't emotionally affect you anymore. You just, it's like,
And part of it is that when you have this operating system
Mhm.
and you get triggered, like what I do now, I used to have to, I get triggered. Wow, she just treated me so blah. And then I have to go through this and I got to figure out the this and this. Now I just identify, oh, wow, she's being a real control freak. Okay, that's my cue.
Yeah.
You cannot become a control freak. And a control freak would be somebody focused on somebody else and their control freakishness.
Right.
So how are you going to let go of her?
It's that perception lens. Yes. That.
And so I do it instantly. It's not always easy.
No, but this is what you kind of teach or kind of, yes. So that it's easier to process through or to get through. I think it's that whole knowledge is power. Once you know how to process it, then it's like, okay, this is a little bit easier. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that kind of what?
It gets easier and easier. And then as you do this, you have much less drama conflict that you're feeding into. I don't have to go to her and go, you were really a control freak last week and it really hurt my feelings, the blah, blah, blah. And then you got that blah, blah. It's like, no, this is my cue for me to not be a control freak. And how am I going to do that? What steps am I going to take not to be a control freak? And then that revolves the focus back to me. And then with her, well, if I don't like that she's a control freak, how would I feel about me being a control freak?
Right.
And so it really reduces all that conflict, which reduces the stress, which brings up the more peaceful aura around us. So
and one person at a time. I get it.
Yeah.
I love this, Barbara. I'm so glad that we talked about this. And I'm sure I have lots of followers who are going to be like, where do I go?
I'd love to talk to all of you. I'd like to talk to you again too, to go deeper into the process.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like a no-brainer to me. It's like okay, that's where it starts. And I kind of always have kind of somewhat thought this or knew this or deep down knew this, but when you bring it out into the open, it's kind of more clear. Do you know what I mean? I will admit the science part of it to me is but I feel like once you kind of do it or you join your readings or whatever you do, you'd understand it better. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think this is beautiful. I'm so glad you came. And good luck with your travels and all of your, the international peace thing that you're doing. I think it's beautiful. And I can't wait to get in and get involved. And I'm actually going to go get off here and go get a couple of your books.
Good. Yes, we need that too. Yeah.
So before we leave though, is there any one message that you would like to one thing that you would like to leave with my followers or my listeners, that just to just that one thing that you could say to them?
Well, I would say that emotion is so powerful. It is our passion. It is our foundation. And that if there's one thing I wish people would walk away from this interview thinking about, is how to detach that emotion from intellect, how to have that breath work, to feel it all and move it all, because you will see immediate results. The first time that the psychic soror and I had a fight and we brought the transcript in and we had this miraculous outcome that we never imagined. I went to work that night. I was singing at this club in Minneapolis and there was a waitress there who never said one word to me. She wouldn't say anything to me. She was just stuck up. And I walked in there that night. She could not speak. Hey, do you like Patti Smith? I've got some tapes you might like. She put a 20 in my tip jar. So I'm saying that when we change within, things naturally shift outside ourselves. Sort of like, Jesus, you could touch the hem of his garment and you'd be healed.
It's totally symbolic of that.
So feel those feelings and then start to develop a witness so that when you're in line at the supermarket or you're driving in the car in traffic and you don't have anything you have to be doing, that you can get into your witness, see what you're thinking, because you'll be shocked to find out what you're really thinking. See what you're feeling, and then listen for that intuition, which is kind of hard, but you begin to do it. Right. And that's the beginning of conflict, revolution, world peace, one person at a time, starting with you. Yeah. And the last thing I would just say is that, because I know I have clients, been channeling for decades. People always come and go, well, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? As if I'm supposed to be going, it's to learn to self-love, period.
And I say the same thing. I think mine, I don't say self-love, but it's the same thing. It's to be your authentic self, to be, and the only way you can do that is to love yourself, who you are, not try and be what everybody wants you to be. You have to be who you are. And then, because the biggest question I get all the time too is, how do I hear my intuition? And I think a lot of it is that inside, being, trusting yourself, loving yourself, being your authentic you. And it all begins there. And I get how, if all of us had that, or all of us could find that, because I'm not saying then that would raise all the collective, and it would.
It is actually. Yes, it is. And of all these podcasts that I've been on, all of them, I'm so buoyed. And here's another one. You, Cari, you're right there. You get it. And we're talking about it. We're generating the frequency and the vibration just by having these conversations. So for me, I love these conversations. I'm reaching little pods of people with every single one that I do. Yep. And so we'll see. We'll see where this heads this time.
Good. I love you. I thank you for coming on. Thank you for doing this. I think I just can't wait to see where all your little quantum leaps lead you.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
and I definitely have you on again. I think it's beautiful message.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, good luck with everything. And we'll have you on again.
Great. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.